Seth Teagle once again with the Firehouse Bros. We have Abigail Swihart on the call today. I promise that I am going to get some kind of intro that's better than a countdown, but hey, you got to be doing something. So I appreciate you joining us. For those of you guys that don't know, Abby's based out of Columbus, Ohio, and is pretty much the disposition queen. That's how I always had kind of come to know her years ago. Is that she was the one that everybody took their stuff to either sell it or I remember getting on your list for wholesale deals. Oh, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, somewhere around that time, and just always seeing stuff. So thanks for jumping on the call with me.
Thanks for
I know
having
you're a fan favorite here in Columbus.
me. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that's taken a long time to build. But yeah, I think it was like 5 years ago. I was working for Dustin Faith, and that's I think how we met.
Yeah, and I think it was what we messaged and text and messaged and even called a couple times over like a 2 or 3 year period, and then finally met. I don't even know, in the last year and a half or so, but it's
Mhm.
always it's like social media though. It's you can build a relationship with somebody without actually meeting them, and it's pretty neat. So
I felt like I knew you, like even though we first talked and got like we knew each other a little bit more in the last year, but before then I was like, oh, that's Seth. Like he's trustworthy, he's a good guy,
yeah,
he knows what he's doing, but we really didn't know each other all that well.
yeah, no, that's exactly right. So the power of networking is definitely a big thing. So.
Mhm.
Well, I wanted to have you on because I think that a couple different things. One, the real estate industry and investing is a male dominated market. If people don't know that, it primarily is. So to see you and I want to talk about what you've created, I think it's very powerful and very interesting. But also to kind of just get the word out there for just to kind of show what you can do, because you're not even 30 years old yet. You've basically retired, from what you've accomplished in real estate, and you've automatized and systematized everything that you're doing to a point where you could really do what you want. I think the last time we met, you're like, I'm kind of bored, like I've reached a point in my career in building this thing that it just kind of does its own thing. And so I wanted to kind of showcase that, talk to people about how that happens. And then, kind of talk about how you got started. And then what it's like to wholesale and how that ties into commercial multifamily and into single family residential. So,
Yeah.
if you want to just start, maybe kind of give us your background and
Sure.
talk to people about how you got into real estate.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So I life's weird and everybody that in my life now is intertwined in different ways. And when I started in real estate, I wasn't planning on doing that. I was at Ohio State. I was entering like my sophomore or junior year, just getting like a communications degree. And I was taking like a bunch of counterterrorism classes and Arabic. And I just thought, like, I was like a fourth grader when 9/11 happened. So I think it traumatized me a little bit. And I wanted to, like, I always had like a deep pride in our country. And I felt like that's what I was going to do. But I was working at Apple actually for Tim Dye of Upward Home Solutions, who has an investing firm in Columbus. Before he had that firm, he was the head store leader of Apple at Polaris, and I was working for him. And a guy walks in and Tim goes, Abby, I need you to help this customer. His name's Don Kenny. He's really important. And I'm like that, okay, like cool. And I was in college. I had no idea who anybody in the real estate industry was. But I knew that name because my dad was really good friends with a guy named Don Kenny. And I help him out. And the next week, Don Kenny's assistant, Kara, messaged me and asked me to go to lunch. And for those who don't know who Don Kenny is, if you're national or not familiar in developing, he's developed over 60,000 units in Columbus. He owns a couple golf resorts and gyms and clubs. He has utility companies. He's extremely successful. And I was talking to him and I had no idea that I was talking to him. So I got really lucky that I received an offer to work for him right out of college. And I was like, oh, I was doing this wrong. Like anything I thought about having a career, like I want to be like this guy. He had like a black Mercedes. He was going out to Florida all the time. Like I didn't even know, but I just was like, working an hourly job for 14 bucks is like not where it's at.
Yeah, that'll help you. It'll lose its luster quickly when you want
Yeah,
to
it
do that.
lost its luster. I was working for Apple, which is like the coolest corporation ever. And I was like, oh, like, no, I want to be like this guy. So he taught me some really basics of investing. And it was hard because we're really different generations, you know. The way that older generations got loans and funding is very different than how I have to now, but the principles are the same and they've always been the same. So it was there under him. I was doing his marketing and development. I got to work with Bob and Skip Weiler. I got to work with Crawford and Hoying. I did a lot of like utility management, and like those companies use a ton of power. And one of Don's companies was a utility company. So I got a lot of experience working with very successful people. I'm very blessed that I didn't really understand the magnitude of their success until now, because I was like this ignorant little 23-year-old running around in like high heels and being nice to people. And now, like, you know, it really came full circle because I learned how to cold call at that company. I learned what it was like to put different pitch decks together and present myself well. It was a very conservative corporate company I worked for. And while I was working for him, I bought my first house and I bought my first rental. I was 21. And I got my two best friends from Ohio State to live with me, and we did like a house hack. So it was a little $175,000 house in Worthington. The mortgage was like $1,200, and we split it 3 ways. So each of us paid $400 a month. And it was like the best time of my life because I got to live with my girlfriends. I got a puppy. We were graduating college. We lived super cheap. We could go on vacations and stuff. It was awesome. And when I bought my first rental, I pulled out equity on that first home to buy my first rental. And that was where I was like, I really need to get into this full time. Like, I think I'm onto something here. I can do this. And I was only making $44,000 a year at that point, which was more money than I'd ever made my entire life. But I just knew, like, if I was going to do this full time, I need to be around someone doing it on a smaller scale. I can't just go build an $100 million apartment complex. I need to learn from the ground up. So it was there I came across a YouTube video with Tiffany High and Dustin Faith it was on YouTube, and like Donald Payne. And Tim Dye kind of made an introduction. I met with Don, and then Donald Payne introduced me to Dustin, and I got coffee with him. And Dustin was at a really like interesting point in his career too, because he was creating his own investment firm company. He came from, I think, Fortune Builders or another like an education program where he was coming up with his own company. And I was his first employee. And I was so blessed because he taught me all the basics of single family investing from the ground up, calculations, comps, everything. And for those who don't know Dustin, he's very diligent, but he's probably one of the kindest people I've ever met. But pretty like serious, like not a ton of joking. And I don't joke around either. So I got to learn a ton. I did acquisitions, marketing, and dispositions for him for a while. And I picked up some of my own rentals along the way. He helped me like learn the basics of private money lending. It was kind of like a paid internship, like really. And we're still friends to this day. It was right before the pandemic, actually, like right after I got married. No, it was right before the pandemic. Before I got married, that I went out onto my own. I had like 7 or 8 rentals by then. And I learned to do dispositions. One thing I was really good at when I was working for Dustin was connecting with investors. I had a better talent for that because it was a relationship that would continue to build. And when I was working with sellers, I felt a lot of like, you know, gratitude and excitement helping them, but it's like a one and done. Like you're done with them after that transaction. And I think my personality fit better towards like maintaining relationships long term. So like me getting licensed and me becoming an investor kind of happened in a weird way. Like I worked with Dustin, and I remember he was like, you probably need to get licensed. You know, you're going to help me with the flips and the listings. Like I need you to get licensed. So when I was leaving Don's company, I actually went straight into Hondros, which is a 4-week crash course on real estate. And he wanted me to get licensed. He had a couple trips planned. I actually didn't get to work with him like the first month I was working for him. I took the rapid course, I got licensed, and then I started working for him all around the same time. It was kind of crazy. So I got licensed just for the purpose of wholesaling and flipping, and it was really helpful because as the markets changed, I've been able to
Mm-hmm.
pivot into lots of different facets of real estate. Yeah, my bread and butter is dispositions and selling assignments, but I do help friends and family with their own real estate needs, and then I do my own. So all the different things have been intertwined.
Yeah.
Getting that
Well,
like
so I want to, so there was a lot of awesome stuff that I feel like
word vomit all
you
over
said, but you probably didn't even know you said it. So,
it.
I want to kind of step back. So the first thing that you did with one is you recognized that you had an opportunity with Ken to get in the room with people that were doing these big things. And
Mhm.
working with him, working with the Weiler group. I mean, I've met Skip a couple times. We bought a deal off from his group a couple years ago. Those like that's like I think the one thing that people miss is that it doesn't cost you anything. Now you obviously went and worked for him and we're doing that, but in the same sense, it doesn't cost you anything to go to a real estate meetup. It doesn't cost you anything to go to a multifamily meetup. You can get into whatever room that you want to get into, or like wherever you want to go. And that was really life changing for you, from what it sounds like, because you went from an average, hourly employee to working with your first group and watching and seeing what they're doing and how they were doing it and how they were saying, like, it puts you in a different room of people, a different room of thinking that you had never been exposed to, or you hadn't been exposed to really previously to that. And then I
Mhm.
love the fact that you, like you said, you learned a lot from them. You kind of, you were kind of flying the wall. You were, you're, like you said, you're kind of being an intern, but what a huge opportunity. Because those that don't know, I mean, those are some pretty big powerhouse groups in Columbus.
I think they're like
Um,
my Britney Spears or like rock.
yeah, I mean, they're
Now
amazing.
I
I mean,
think of
and
like
some of, I think, like the Weiler group is like second generation. I mean, and they're almost like probably third generation at this point. I mean, and to build what they have in our area here is just, it's crazy. They just, it's like I said, anybody, at least in my space, anybody that's would know who they are, know what they're
yeah.
doing. You could drive around Columbus and look at any major landmarks, Polaris, just that I can think off the top of my head. They've had their hands in it,
And that's
or
the
they've been a
thing.
part of it.
No, I think a lot of people maybe in my space in the smaller Maltese or like the single family space don't maybe know who they are, but you also don't like maybe know who they are because there's so many entities that all of these guys
Right.
have that like not to be like a conspiracy theorist, but there's so many groups that they're all a part of in different facets. Just like you have Firehouse Bros and you have your syndication and you have like all the different things that you do and your multi-family development. No one would know if unless they know you personally and they know you on another level. Like these guys have their hands in so many things.
Right. And that was and like you said before, that that's the way that it was always done. The deals were always made in country club rooms or cigar rooms or
Yeah.
people's back patios, or what I mean. That's just the way it's always been. And it's still that way to an extent with a lot
Mhm.
of the stuff that we do, because a lot of our investors are people that we have relationships with, and we met them, through networking and different events that we go to. But it's different in today's world with social media, like putting ourselves out there, being in front of people. It's no longer like an untouchable thing. I mean, obviously, again, to get to their size and their levels, like a whole another realm that's taken several generations to get there. But they are truly impacting Columbus, and you can see their footprint all over the place,
Yes,
if you know where to look.
absolutely.
So I think that's the two big things I love about that, is that for me, it was, I got to a point in my life where I had to do something different. I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. It opened up my eyes to like a whole different world of get what I wanted. And you were exposed in a different way through Ken, and then you worked for him, and then you were in those rooms, you saw everything, and then you just kind of transitioned from them. And I think that's super important for people to understand. Get in the room. If I can't see, if you can't ever learn anything else from anything, watching what we do here, is that's super important. And real
Yeah.
estate meetups are free. They're all over Columbus. If you're whatever you're interested in, you can find a group that's putting on a meetup. And sometimes you got to pay for them, right? Paying,
Mhm.
to me, the reason people charge is because that's how they know. They want to eliminate the tire kickers. They want to know you're serious. If
Yes.
you want them to put in their time and in their effort, and really provide value to you, they want to know that you're also truly there to learn and are going to take action. Because my time's super important, just like yours is super important. And if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to learn how to wholesale," you're super busy. And so for you
Right.
to stop what you're doing and teach them, like you don't want to waste your time with somebody that's not actually serious. And so sometimes, that's why people ask, hey, my time is $250 an hour, or it's $500 an hour, or you can join my week-long training class and I'll teach you everything we know about, flipping a house or wholesaling or whatever. And it's $2,000, whatever it is. They know you're vested. And then you also know that the content they're going to bring you is valuable. So I think that those
Right.
are really two neat things. And then as you got out, I don't know, kind of away from those bigger groups and you got in with some other people, again, you were working for them, earning an hourly wage or some type of compensation, but you were also learning. And I think that's a huge thing. And that was what I did was I worked for somebody for a year for almost for free, which you and I both know, Steve. I worked with him, this was years ago, but
Yeah.
that's where I got kind of like my on the job training was, and again, you can learn good things and bad things. Here's how I would do it. Here's how I wouldn't do it. Or man, if I was in charge of this, I would do it this way.
Right.
But you're consuming knowledge, you're consuming what they're giving you. And, that kind of, you did all those things and it led you to a point where, like you said, you got licensed. And then where in that transition did you go from kind of working for somebody else to like, hey, I could, like you kind of said, I could went out on my own and did it. What did
Well,
that look like?
it was an interesting like time because I think I had like 6 or 7 on my own, and I was, dispoing for Dustin, and it was a nice transition because his business was changing and growing, and he had Nicole, his wife, that works with him now, and I was like still able. I kind of approached him. I said, hey, like, it's very common in our space to have non-competes. And I did have one. But there was a caveat that I was allowed to go out on my own. Like I can't go work for other people. And the things that Dustin taught me are worth $1 million.
Oh yeah.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I'm
There's
sure.
no, and the one thing that I was always super respectful on, and he was the person that paid, and he knew a lot of things by experience and through paid opportunities and networking events and masterminds. I was super respectful that he spent a lot of money on those things. So it's like one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I'm not telling anyone, but like when my niche of dispo kind of like took a life of its own, I approached him and I said, hey, like, this is what I want to do. Like, kind of, do I have your blessing? This is what I want to, and I still dispoed for him
Mm-hmm.
while I started dispoing for other people. And it wasn't really like competition. It was just different and a niche that I kind of worked into. Um, and that's what it looked like. And the first couple months were kind of scary because I went from like having this nice salary with him and like, some, commissions and stuff to like all commission. And, thank God when my girlfriends moved here from Minnesota, she didn't know I wasn't a very experienced buyer's agent. I was used to listing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not rocket science, but like she came up to me. She's like, I want to buy a house. I'm like, okay. So I made like $6,000 there. I'm like, okay, this will keep me going for like 3 months. Like I need to get something else going in like 3 months and I'll be okay. So the transition period in like 2019 to 2020 was like a little rocky, but and I didn't really buy a bunch. And the year COVID hit, just basically because a lot of lending kind of shriveled up
Mm-hmm.
overnight. I didn't. So I spent a lot of time honing in on relationships, and I was at every networking event. I was at like, growing my buyers list, constantly taking calls from people, analyzing deals for free. And that's, really how it took on a life of its own. I quickly realized though that like I can't just go and do all these walkthroughs and be on the phone and schedule marketing for the next day. So my friend Tyler at the time was available to help me with walkthroughs. And he's still with us today at East Lane. He does all of our walkthroughs and he does a lot of buyer like calls for new buyers and stuff. And, him and I kind of tag teamed it for a while until I got a full-time marketing assistant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's a tough transition to go from whether you're, a W-2 to entrepreneur or business owner. How much of your like the rentals that you did have, how much cash flow, like were you getting enough cash flow from those to kind of support your lifestyle at the time or?
It was probably like 75% of like because I
Mm-hmm.
had my girlfriends were still living with me. So my expenses were really low. Like my dad never let me take out a car loan. Like it was like you buy the whole thing or you don't buy it at all. So I had no car payment. I had like minimal student loans, like $150 a month. And I had like $400 for the house and like any expenses. So it really wasn't bad as far as that. And the rentals did kind of help. but it wasn't enough to just like completely survive on. And
Yeah.
that I think was the blessing because it made me keep working hard and not just
Yeah.
like sit back and feel the
Yeah, yeah, and I don't even know. I mean, if you knew you were house hacking back then, but that's something that I tell a lot of people that will reach out to me, are like, "How do I get started?" And not everybody can jump into buying an apartment building or buying something like really big. I mean, can it be done? Yes, I'm an example of that where I just probably was I didn't know what I didn't know, and I probably was just foolish enough to believe I could do it,
right.
and so I didn't think twice about it. But a lot of people trying to understand how to do real estate, there's kind of like a common theme that people will talk about is wholesaling, house flipping, and then all of a sudden at some point they realize, oh, maybe I should do some rentals, and they do single family for a while, and then they're, oh, maybe I should get into some bigger things, and there's another transition where it's hard to go from a lot of guys I talk to or gals or single family folks that are like they don't know how to make the transition into that first bigger deal. And
Yeah.
I think that you've done it well. You are able to execute on the dispositions, which again, for people that maybe don't know what that means, it's literally like you are the end seller for the investor. So I buy a house, I'm going to flip it. Most investors aren't licensed realtors, so you can't necessarily sell, or you can't take it to the full market. So they bring it to somebody that can. And that was how we met, was because you were very connected. And even out of state investors now that call me that are like, hey, I would like to look at some single family too. I just send them right to you because
Thank you.
it's it's an easy connection. But
Yeah.
like walk me through that. Like, that's something that people also ask is how do you, like, for us, how do you guys market? How do you find your deals? We
Yeah.
do a lot of stuff through brokers because anything above 50 units or more, you're not gonna
You're
you're
not
not
doing
gonna
it.
send somebody a mailer. Like I get them every day and they go right in my trash can. I don't care. I don't want to see it. I'm not gonna mess with people sending me letters. If I'm going to sell a property, we're going to go through a broker because that broker is being paid to vet the people that he's bringing to us. We
Mhm.
don't have time to waste
Well,
finding out later that
doctors or lawyers, like you have to have some money to own 50 units or more. Like you just
yeah.
so you're in
Well,
a
you do. Hey, I didn't have a whole lot. You just got to
you
have
did.
again. You got to have the
So
right
you're the
connection.
anomaly.
You got to have the network. You got to have the. But
Well,
walk me through that. Like, how
yeah,
does that? How does somebody do that legally? Because I remember the an event was put on. I mean, man, it was probably a couple years ago now, where they had somebody from the state come in and kind of talk about it. But
yeah, and pet it. Mhm.
yeah. So talk about what is wholesaling. How is it done correctly in Ohio? But also, like, what tactics have you found? Like, if somebody's watching this, and they're like, man, I want to do multifamily, and I don't, maybe they don't have enough money to take down a big deal, or they're kind of working on those things. But you can pick up small multifamily all day long through direct to seller marketing. And so, like, what have you found to be the most successful things that you've used, or I wouldn't say tactics, but you're getting the most
Sure.
responses from?
Well, the first answer is probably not going to be the most fruitful, but it's referrals. And it's only because it's taken me so long and being very consistent. But I would say the second and third is going to be like direct mail marketing, and knowing who to target on those things. That the people that sell you something are probably, and I'm not trying to put them in a box, but doctors, lawyers, attorneys, people of higher net worth. The people that sell the single family homes are usually people in distress. They're living in those homes. Maybe they, thought a rental was a good idea at one point and they had to evict someone. So you really kind of come from a place of like, it's distressed. The first and foremost thing is the house is usually distressed, behind on taxes, behind on payments. Sometimes estate sales, kind of probate, houses, evictions, anything where like the house is either financially or physically under stress. Those are the people that really, respond the quickest to those marketing, and then getting the right marketing lists. There's a lot of science, and the guys that I sell for, and then when I sell my own stuff, like those lists are really valuable, but they're expensive. You have to think, if you're depending on your open rate, and if you're into direct mail marketing, you know that if you cast a net of 5,000 people and it's 50 cents or 75 cents a mailer or whatever, and you're expecting like a 1% response rate, like you better hit the target with those walkthroughs and those appointments with those sellers. It takes a lot to get a little. And you have to cast the what, like, the net out pretty wide. Like you say, I think some sellers are numb to getting a ton of mail. I get mail marketing on my properties all the time, and usually I'm nice. I'm like, hey, just take me off. Like,
Yeah.
This is who I am. But I mean, there's some other things that people do. There's texting and cold calls. There's voicemail blasts. There's some legal things with that I may or may not suggest, just because times are always changing, especially with technology and marketing and soliciting. But the best, like, tried and true method is mail marketing and buying distressed lists. They're public record. If someone's being foreclosed on, all of those things are public record. So there's data scraping companies that can skip trace for you. They can get you that information. And then as far as like letters go, people, this might ring a bell with people or not, but anything that's like, we buy ugly houses, we buy your house cash as is, no marketing, no realtor fees, no closing costs, can get you an offer in 24 hours. Like, different marketing like that is primarily how people get those leads for off-market real estate, especially in the single family or like under 4 unit type
Yeah.
deal.
How do you, so that's, again, it's funny because I was accidentally, I would say I was accidentally successful on the first one that I did, because I did it out of necessity, right? I had a career that I loved, that I was doing well at. And I was looking for something to kind of free up my time or buy my time back. And I learned in the first year of kind of doing on the job training that it was a lot of work, right? When I was overseeing some projects for Steve, like, it was another full-time job, and watching, just
Yeah.
managing the rental portfolio that he had was like another full-time job. And all the things that went into it, especially if you're flipping houses. Two things that turned me off to it was the amount of how logistically heavy it was, the
Super
amount of risk, the amount of risk that was involved, because,
very high.
if you're new to that and you listen to a wholesaler that doesn't really know what they're talking about, or you don't really know what you're talking about, you think you do, but you're off on your numbers, you can be upside down in that thing very, very quickly, or
Totally.
you buy on the wrong street, or all
You
of those.
struck a nerve in my brain a little bit, because I'm like, yes, 100%.
Yeah. Well,
People,
and those are the things that scared me to death. I was like, man, my first one had to be a home run. It had to be successful. If it wasn't, it could have, I mean, it could bankrupt you. I mean, I've watched and talked to people who have lost 10,000, 20,000 on a flip because they got into it, thought they were good. They read a couple books, listened to some podcasts, went out and flipped, and they over renovated the property. And now the amount that they sunk into it, they'll never get out because they overdid it for the area that it's in, or the prospect buyer, doesn't value the granite countertops.
yeah,
You read in a book that everybody should get granite countertops because it's durable, and you put it in there, and then you go to sell the house and nobody cares that it's got granite. They
yeah,
don't find any value in that, and so you're stuck, and
right.
I watched in that year, I watched as, like, I remember there being in a house in Lancaster where I was there quite a bit, and I think that we barely broke even on that thing, but the amount of time that was spent there to just barely break even, I'm like, oh my gosh, like,
Not worth it.
no. And like I said, and my
No.
motivation for getting into real estate was time freedom, to
Yeah.
buy my time back so that I could spend it doing other things that I wanted to do on my days off, and not that. And so, it really just, I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And that's where I got, I kind of got turned on to multifamily. Back when Bigger Pockets it only had one podcast instead of like 7 variations now.
I love Bigger
It,
Pockets.
yeah, I mean, it was like the original one that I ever listened to, but everybody that came on there that talked about multifamily, or, most of them were talking about small multifamily. Nobody was coming on talking about syndications. But even then, what I continually heard was, a 6 unit or a 10 unit or a 15 unit was easier to manage underneath one roof than it was to have, 10 or 15 houses spread out all over the city. And
100%.
so, yeah, so for me, that was my situation, or what that's what pushed me to multifamily anyways. But did you feel that, like, when you were, you house hacked, you pulled out enough equity in your Worthington house to be able to buy probably your first rental or two? And
Mhm.
maybe did you do that, like, where you bought your first one with the equity,
Yep.
the home equity line of credit, then you renovated that one, and then did you do that again? You refied it, bought another one?
I did like 4 or 5 Burr method, cycle through my money all the way to the 35 units I have now. And I think you struck a couple points that really made a lot of sense, is that I think people just like get into real estate because they think it's like easy. Like, nothing makes me more frustrated than someone that's just going to come to wholesale to get a ton of money and not realize the work it takes to put into it, let alone single family and multifamily deals take a ton of time and underwriting and constant underwriting of properties. Like I underwrite probably 10 properties a day just to look at stuff and give people a dose of reality. And when I was starting to, it was, and you said another thing that was really important is that your first deal has to be like a home run. I was telling that to my husband today. New investors, like you can't just go hit maybe a single, because your single could be like a quick out, super easy on one thing. Like you need to hit a double, triple, or a home run your first one. It's that much more important. And I got really lucky that I did. I bought my first 3 rentals from Tim Dye, and they were all in Southampton. And I thought it was cool because, like, Hampton, like, you know, like New York, the Hampton.
Hmm.
And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is cool. But this is like Eastmore Hampton. It's very different. I loved the name, and I was like, oh, cool. I own houses on Hampton. And now I own 8 on Hampton, and I like own a ton in that area. But that was so much more important that like I really was disciplined. And Tim Dye said something very important to me. He said, underwrite 50, 100 deals to yourself, just to do it. Now I think I did like 10 before I was tired of doing it. But you have to do your homework or you're going to like lose it. And I think a lot of people get into it. And even on the flips and stuff, I think people are scared of hearing reality and not checking with enough people on like their numbers and like, hey, can you analyze this deal for me? I'm about to like, you know, pull the trigger. It can make or break you. So the first couple, and I think I was lucky that I was like 21 and 22 at the time because I had a lot of energy. And I feel like I turned 30 in like a month, and I feel like my energy, my tolerance for BS and my energy has just been rapidly depreciating. So that's probably good for me. But at the time, it was like you buy one. And my first rental, I got my loan from, it was a bank that did all their own servicing. So it went to a board and they were like, well, she's 21. She needs to put like 30% down.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
So,
Thanks for that.
thanks. Like, this is awesome. I think I cried like 3 times and I don't cry. So it was very annoying. And I had a ton of equity in it. So I actually refinanced that one, pulled out like 30,000 in equity, and I bought like 2 more with it. And then the other 2 bought like, then I started getting into private money lending and I could like recycle it that way. So I've done like 5 or 6 Bird Method refis to get us to this portfolio now. But the exhaustion on just pulling 1 or 2 units, like even we have like 3 turns going on, 1 Airbnb just like finished. And I'm like, the logistics to do 1 is very similar than the logistics to do my 4 unit, which is probably on a bigger scale for you, your 50 unit. But I'm really glad I learned the way I did at the age I did, because now I can appreciate it and be like, I'm never doing that again. Like,
Yeah.
no, now.
Yeah. And I think that, like you said, just for 2 things. One, like the home run doesn't mean that it has to, I would put it this way, for if it's your first deal, whether it's multifamily or single family, you don't want your first deal to be the one that needs like $100,000 of construction, foundation work, you know, floor joists are rotten, like all this big stuff, because that's where people, I think they get off. They get fixated on like, oh, this house or this duplex is $45,000 or whatever the low price is. And then they're like, oh, you know, it's easy to say, oh, it only takes, you know, it needs these things done and it's only gonna take this amount of money, but actually doing the work, finding the right people to do it, not getting ripped off, understanding, you know, like lien releases and having the contracts and having a scope of work and all these different things are a big thing. That's how a lot of people lose money. But you know, the original guy I went to college with named Matt that kind of got me sparked into real estate. Like he was like, your first one needs to be a home run, but it needs to be like lipstick on a pig is how he called it. I mean, just kind of finding something that like, hey, you change the paint color, you change the carpet, maybe you know, change the bushes out front, cut the grass, you know, maybe you change the exterior paint color, and that's it. And then you put it back on the market. And he's like, and that at least gives you proof of concept. It gives you some confidence to know you money. And so just so people understand that, you know, a home run can be fine. You could find one on the MLS in reality. I mean, I know a lot of people say, oh, you never, you know, you don't ever look there, but I mean, I know people that have found deals on MLS, bought them, fixed them up, done the work that if the seller would have done them, they would have made the money, but they didn't want to.
Right.
And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is the burst strategy. So I don't know who will see this. So walk me through what that is and what that looks like, and kind of how you execute that successfully. Because not, there may be people that don't know what it is.
Yeah. So the BRRRR method stands for buy, rehab, rent, and then refinance. I think I
There you
got
go.
that right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it starts with buying, and you usually buy it with cash or like quick money, hard money. It's an expensive money to get. Like it's usually 12 to 15%. And you buy it up front, and you buy it off market, or you can buy it from MLS. That's fine too. I like to buy stuff off market though, because it's less for like the public to see. I'm kind of like a conspiracy theorist, and like if an auditor, it's on the auditors, you see the transfers, that's fine. But if it's on the MLS and it shows multiple sales and like the photos and stuff, like from an appraiser's perspective, I think they're a little bit more and not as like likely to appraise it where I need it to be. So I like buying it off market, and then with no photos on public where it looked like, from the beginning. And then I add value to it. So it's going to be paint, carpet, cabinets, appliances, any like foundation or like mechanical issues, roof, plumbing, and I get it like really nice, but I do it to a degree. Like you said, sometimes there's a diminishing return on granite. There's like a diminishing return depending on what neighborhood you're in. It only makes sense to go so far. And I put in what I think needs to be done to get it safe and beautiful. I then, go out. My assistant goes out and gets us a tenant, puts it in place, gets the property cash flowing. And then I go out and I refinance it at the new appraised value. So in turn, sometimes I get the property essentially for free, like my cash on cash return is really good. Sometimes I get money back. I haven't ever had to owe money at a closing. That's good. But the goal is to get it like all your money back or like more. That's the goal there.
Yeah. And something that you said, and then we'll get to Matt's question and it's just, again, that's why I love, when we get together and have conversations, I love it. We're in two different realms of the real estate world, but there's a lot of things that are the same where, like you just said, we always consider the prospect tenant. For us, when we're buying something, like, what's the area look like? If we come in and we buy a building, we renovate all the units and we do all this fixing up, are we going to be able to attract the person that will pay the higher market rent? So if I buy in an area that's a rough area, it doesn't matter how much I fix in that property, I'm not going to attract, if I'm taking the rents from 600 to 900, because that's what I'm seeing in the market, in that, can I attract somebody that can pay 900? Because if they can pay 900, but go somewhere where it's more secure, more safe, they don't have to worry about their car getting broken into or whatever, they're not going to come to my building. And so that's something, again, is buying right. So like you talked about getting it for the right price up front. A lot of people will make their money on the upfront where they buy it correctly. And then judging your renovation, making sure that that's done, all your numbers are right. Which, again, getting a deal from you is different than getting from an unknown wholesaler or somebody like that, because there's people that are putting all kinds of crazy numbers out there that some of the groups that I'm a part of, I'm like, it's quite funny.
It takes everything in me not to comment. It just does more harm than good, but my goodness, some stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's why, like I said, having a mentor is such a big deal, because like, if you have somebody like, let's say you pay, Abby says, hey, look, I'll train you, but I need, it's going to cost you X to learn what I do. And then you have her ear, she's not going to do it for you, but somebody that, that you're trying to get into it, it's cheaper for you to pay. It's cheaper for somebody to pay you or to pay me to learn what we know than it is to go out on your own and fall on your face.
Yeah.
That could ruin you, right? That could not just ruin you, but ruin your personal finances. It could cause you to go bankrupt. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just, I'm just so big on getting in the right room with people and finding a mentor. So anyways, Matt asked, what's the secret to buying in the off market versus on market? And do you approach an owner by knocking on his or her door?
I've never done that. But buying off market, it's going to be more like relationship based. It's not going to be public facing on the MLS or anything like that. A lot of those deals are on Facebook groups. So depending on what city you're in, I would just like put your city name and then put like off market properties, search on Facebook groups, joining your local real estate investing network groups. They usually have like off market deals there. But a lot of my deals have come off of relationships. So even deals that I purchase, someone knows that I love Hampton and they're going to send me a house near there. Because they know me. Being in like the public and networking and constantly, saying, hey, like I'm looking for something here, like pass my card along if someone, has a property that fits this, can really take you like miles. But most of them are like on Facebook. On those Facebook groups are going to be different wholesalers and investor like firms. And from there, you can join email lists. Email marketing is usually like the bread and butter of any good disposition house. Some people do like texting. I keep my texting kind of to a minimum because I don't want to be like annoying to people.
Hmm.
So I only text like my VIPs and like things I know that they're actually going to want. But there's texting lists you can join too. But most of them are like Facebook and email groups. And I personally like buying off market, more so because I feel like I'm not paying top dollar, which may or may not have been true last year, but at least it made me feel like it. Usually the deals and the spreads are a little bit higher when you're buying off market than buying something on MLS.
Yeah. And I read a book several years ago that really helped elevate my life. It was Who Not How by Dan Sullivan.
Mhm.
And, you know, uh, I always viewed wholesalers as like, I never wanted to get into it because again, it's like, if that's your lane, you can be a rock star in that. It's hard to be I mean, at least I feel like it's hard to be like a great wholesaler and also a great house flipper or a great something else, like that's
Yeah.
why, like we do multifamily and that's what we do. And then we're developing multifamily. So it's like, that is what our thing is. So I love it because the best, highest, and best use of my time, if I was a house flipper, is pay the wholesaler.
Yes.
Like find one that that's providing you real deals that will close, that aren't like daisy chained, that are like legitimate things. Build a relationship with that person, and then when they bring you a house and they're like, hey, the spread for you might be 25,000, but they're going to make 8,000 on the contract. Like
Who
don't try to
cares?
negotiate them down. Don't get all worked up. Like they're putting a lot of time and effort and money into kind of getting those deals under contract. And again, there's a lot of really bad wholesalers out there. Again, if you're going to do that, like be a rock star at it.
Right.
Learn how to do it from somebody that's doing it well. Do it right. Be ready to close on that property. If you put it under contract, same thing that we are with a multifamily. If we're going to put it under contract, we better actually be able to close it.
Yes.
And that's all important stuff. So
I think you're right. Like, I think a lot of flippers get tied up into the assignment fees that they paid. I mean, all of my units have been on an assignment agreement, whether it's my own or I'm paying someone else an assignment. I think I paid like, I'm not kidding you. I bought a duplex in Grove City, and my assignment fee to that wholesaler was $100,000, like literally 100 grand. And I'm like known for my wholesaling. And I said, good job. It's still a great deal for me. Thank you.
yeah, well,
And I
that's
just
just it. Yeah, whatever your spread
got it.
is above that,
Right.
that's all that you should look at. Don't look at the cost, but look at what you're going to earn. And that's, I mean, we pay people referral fees for just introductions to other folks that invest with us.
Exactly.
I've had people bring us a deal that same thing. They got it under contract through direct mail marketing. We don't really do it. Again, I mean, work with brokers and work with a lot of those guys and gals. But if somebody brings me a deal and says, hey, I got this thing under contract, are you interested? And it's legitimate. Like if you brought it to me and I know that this is real, um, I have no problem paying you 100,000, 200,000, like whatever, because as long as the numbers work for me, what does it matter? Good for you. Bring me another one,
What does it matter? That is the key sentence. Like it doesn't matter. And I think that in this space, you can't be worried. You need to be worried about spending money in the wrong places. But one thing is your referral sources need to be paid. Like it's so important that people are paid, and to put a whole infrastructure on wholesaling, it is so expensive. You need to have people on the phones constantly. You need to answer that phone within 5 minutes of a
yeah,
distressed seller calling you. There's marketing, there's systems involved for the marketing, there's follow-up systems, there's like texting systems, phone calls, like email, like there's so much involved that it's like if you're just a flipper, it is not worth it to become a wholesaler too. It's just not.
yeah. And that's exactly it. Understand what your lane is.
Mhm.
Where is your highest and best use of time? And if you're a very good house flipper, you're a very good multifamily operator, whatever, like don't get caught in the weeds on something else. Just find like the person that's the best in that space and then network with them, maximize their time. And, like I said, if every time you bring a deal to somebody, they're getting after you and trying to negotiate you down on your fee, you're going to stop bringing them deals.
Oh, I'm like
because
never going to talk to you again.
yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
I'm going to be like, see ya. It was great. This one
Yeah.
deal.
And, if you want to grow and you want to get bigger and you want to like be successful, like again, quick example, the very first deal that I did, the week of closing, the bank came back and said, "Hey, we know we told you guys 20% down, but we want 25, $75,000 we had to come up with." And I'm like, well, where are we going to find that? Because me and the other investor, we had what we had.
Yeah.
So Steve connected me with a local person here in Columbus who was a hard money lender for him. That was like a off the books private person. He's like, call this guy. I'll call him, tell him you're going to call him. Then you call him and you talk to him. I'd never done hard money before. I really didn't have a huge resume to be able to do this, but I was like, okay, called them. I went and met with them. I gave them the whole plan. They lent us the $75,000 at 2 points and 16% interest, which sounds, well, I know, but at the time I'm like, oh my
Right.
gosh,
That
like
sounds a lot.
it's crazy, right?
That sounds like
I
a
ended
lot.
up paying them the 2 points up front, which is 2% of the initial amount. And
Okay.
then when I paid them back, I ended up paying them 90,000. So they made 15,000 plus the original 2% that we paid them on their money. But when we refied, we pulled out $1 million. So that's what
Right.
I'm saying is that like
That makes
if
that
you
sound
get
like
caught, if you get caught on like if I would have gotten stuck on the interest rate of like, hey, 16%, like what do you, that's crazy. Like I could go get it here, I could go do this. Like I didn't care. I needed the money to get the deal done. The deal got done, and I look at where it's projected me now. And that's the thing is, like I said, is you got to focus on. Don't get stuck like on the fee or what the person's asking you. Or you want to get in real estate, and you call Abby, and she's like, "Hey, it's $5,000 for 6 months of my time, but when you're done, you'll know how to wholesale, or you'll know how to flip property, or you'll know how to do whatever." Like, don't get hung up on the cost. Look at where it's going to get you, and that's where the value's at. So,
And what's the highest and best use of your time? Like, I have an assistant for like everything at this point, but you know what your highest and best use of your time is, and it's not door knocking or sending out mail. And that's what I had to come in to realize. Like, if I was going to scale this wholesaling company and dispositions and like still own my own rentals, like what's going to be the highest and best use of my time so I don't get like, stuck in the weeds, so to speak. And one thing is paying. Like, you're going to have to, this business is a lot of money, and you have to pay money. And I have full-time assistants for marketing. I have a full-time assistant for my property management. And I think by investing in some of that, it comes back tenfold.
yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Investing in A players always makes you money.
Mm-hmm.
Investing money in C players is always going to cost you money. I've learned that. It's the same with like admin folks. It's the same with contractors. It's the same with whatever it is. If you focus on the cost, you usually end up getting yourself in, it ends up being more expensive in the long run if you just paid paid the right people. So,
Yes.
I don't know, but anyways, well, I appreciate your time. We're coming up on like 40 minutes, I think. What do we have? Like 48 minutes. So, so again, I'll put this on the screen. If you guys are watching this and you're interested in getting into multifamily, or you're learning how to do, some of the things that Abby talked about, we're doing our academy coming up in September. I believe she's going to be a part of it and going to be talking primarily about how to find direct to seller stuff. I mean, again, we don't do it a lot, so I'm going to bring in an industry expert that I know, like, and trust to go over kind of some of her methods and what she does and how she does it, because you can use it for single family, multifamily, anything above 50 units. It's probably going to be more of the broker world, but there's plenty of people out there with 10 units, 20 units, 30 units, that you can market to, and then they call you directly and you can work something out. So,
Yeah,
it's,
the methods are the same.
yep.
No
Yeah. And that's what's great. So, like I said, check it out. If you're of interest, you'll see her on the inside of that, and hopefully you guys will got some value out of it. Looks like we had a couple people that liked it. So
Good.
that's always the goal.
Good.
So appreciate your time, Abby.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And if anyone has any questions, where do we have my email or?
Yep. Well, I don't have your email. I got your website. So they can go to right there.
On my website is buyers list lead. Like, you can add in your information, and there's my contact information there as well. Most of my properties are in Columbus, but they kind of float in and around there. Lancaster, Athens. I get some stuff in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton every once in a while. But thanks so much for having me, Seth. I always like
Yeah.
talking to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hey, if any of the out of state folks that I know that are, I know like Matt in Washington is probably, I don't know if he's actually called you or not, but I've given him your number like 3 times, Matt. So if you're watching this, give her a call. But, if you're looking to get into the Columbus market and you're looking to, in your out of state, get a hold of Abby because she's one of the best. I guess again, well liked and respected by a lot of people around here. So that's super key to finding the right folks.
Especially when
But
you're out of state. 100%.
yes, absolutely. 100%. So, all right. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a
Thanks.
good day.